The model boat Scillonian3. About 25 miles southwest of the treacherous rocky coast of the western tip of Cornwall in England lie the beautiful Isles of Scilly, renowned for their beautiful subtropical garden and endless flower displays. These islands benefit from the still warm waters of the remnants of the Gulf Stream as these currents drift southward along the English mainland and are a favorite vacation spot for visitors from all over Europe. A daily ferry service links the port of St. Mary's on Scilly Island with the famous town of Penzance in southwest Cornwall. This ferry makes the voyage every day except during the winter months, and the typical weather in the English Channel can provide a rousing adventure for the most hardy. The name of this very seaworthy vessel is Scillonian3. She was built at the world-famous Appledore shipyard in Devon in 1977 and is home-ported in the Scilly Islands. This ship is a diesel-driven, twin-screw vessel capable of carrying up to 600 passengers and several automobiles and miscellaneous cargo. She is 223 feet long, displacing 1,255 tons, and sails at 16 knots. She is self-contained with an onboard cargo crane and also has a restaurant and overnight accommodations. I've been a scratch builder model maker for over 70 years, concentrating on my passion for radio-controlled model sailplanes, gliders to the uninitiated. Being a naval officer for a while and a Hobie Cat sailor also gave me a love for well-designed boats, and I decided to find a ship that was out of the ordinary which could be modeled. My wife Jenny and I had visited Penzance, where she spent summers as a young girl in the town where her father grew up. I learned of the Scillonian3 and decided that it would be a perfect radio-controlled model boat for me to build. I purchased the model plans from Traplet Publishing in England and began the project of March of 2014. I've never liked kits, and I will not buy ready-made models. This model uses the techniques that I've learned through the years since my father first taught me the art of creating things with my hands. This hatch opens up. The crane is pulled by cables here, and the crane elevates vertically, and this hatch folds like so. And then the crane goes down in here and puts cargo out onto the docks. It doesn't haul much cargo because there's another cargo ship that kind of goes with us called the Guimarita, which is basically an ugly cargo ship, but that carries all the automobiles. You can put a couple cars in here, and you can put a few 10-foot containers in, but normally it's a passenger ship. About 600 passengers maximum, and during the good weather it's a good voyage unless the English Channel is rough, in which case this thing takes a pretty good beating. Anyway, there's cabins down below. You can actually get overnight cabins in this thing if you wanted to, which nobody really does, but there's cabins here, and then the aft deck here there's open seating, and the poop deck where all the mooring equipment is. The superstructure for this little boat fits on top of the hull. The hull is made basically of wood. It's strips of basswood planking that were put on an upside down frame. It was planked, sanded, and then it was all covered with fiberglass and polyester resin, sanded down and painted, and then a lot of the wood structure inside was kind of sanded and augured out to lighten it somewhat. Although I do have to say that when I got done with it, I shouldn't have done that because I had to add ballast. It carries some pretty heavy ballast in it. Before we close up, you can see the engine room, as it were. These are two motors. These are 12-volt motors, and they are reversible. They're brushless motors, and each motor is controlled by a controller here, which is radio controlled by this radio receiver here. The antenna gets a signal, 2.4 gigahertz, comes down, and one channel controls this motor, fore and aft. This lead here goes to another one of these controllers, and this side controls this motor, fore and aft. So you have forward and reverse on both motors, and also the third channel will allow the rudder. And now that my darling wife has brought my transmitter back, I will demonstrate the magic. I have a switch on each one of these to turn them off. Okay, now if you look at this servo here, you'll see it goes to the back, and hidden under here are a pair of twin rudders, port and starboard. They'll turn. They're proportional. They'll turn, and I can move the rudders and I can move the controls for either motor simultaneously. They don't have to be done one at a time. They're called proportional. They can be used simultaneously and all at one time. And when the motors turn, for instance, on the port motor, if I want to go ahead on the port motor, it spins counterclockwise. There you can see it spinning very slowly counterclockwise. The starboard motor spins clockwise, and that's traditional in most ships to do. The superstructure is made basically of just foam board. Very light. All the black stuff on here is just ink penned on, decorated and so forth, but it's very light. The whole thing doesn't weigh probably 4 or 5 ounces because it's all hollow. And it fits on like so, and that's the way the ship sails. The railings all around here are all made of string and cyanoacrylate to stiffen up the string, and all the little benches are just made of 1/64 inch 3-ply plywood, which is lined with a felt tip pen. Everything else is hand painted on here. This is the bridge. The pilot house is down in here, but on top of the bridge, of course, we have a little radio direction finder. We have a binnacle, which is the main ship's compass, which is up out of the way. We have a Polaris, which is a device where you can actually sight things on the shore and get directions and so forth to ranges on the shore. Here's 2 radar units up here. From here, this mast down would normally be signal lines and aerial wires. I don't put any wires or lines on here because this thing actually comes off. And when I put this whole boat away, this comes off, the foremast comes off, and the after mast comes off. So it'll fit in a smaller container. In the earlier days, the lifeboat was handled by these jib booms here, but it tended to be set down and it tended to bump against these strakes here. These black lines down on the side of the ship are used against a pier. They're to keep the ship from scraping up against the pier because obviously 4 times a day it's going to be next to a pier in Penzance and then to the Scilly Islands, and then leaving the Scilly Islands and back to Penzance. So these strakes, they're called rubbing strakes. That's the black thing, but you can put the Zodiac out and it doesn't get hung up on these rubbing strakes like the old lifeboat did. That's why they changed it. This mast also all comes off, the aftermast and so forth. And what you see up here on the tops of these masts are the navigation lights, which are required of all vessels. And then on the poop deck, this is a nice place to sit when the wind is blowing this way. You sit back down in here, you're protected. And then the after part of the poop deck are where the mooring lines and the capstan here for holding the heavy lines that moor these ships to the dock. And there's also, up forward here, we also have mooring lines and a capstan back in here. And then, of course, the anchors and the anchor chains. Now, the anchors are never used unless the ship has to stop offshore somewhere, but there are anchors and there's anchor chains here. Living at RRCC, the small lake on number 7 fairway right outside my back door serves as a perfect pond for my old body to sit by in the morning sunshine as I try to relive my days in the winter on the bridges of destroyers in the North Atlantic, or baking in the endless sauna of a 4-hour quarterdeck watch in some forgotten tropical port. Suddenly I don't have a rudder. cold, wet, heaving seas breaking over the bows now, soaking me to the bones as I try to hunker down in my foul weather gear and brush the icicles from my face. And no need to wipe the sweat from my brow as I wait for my relief to show up. Retirement. I think it's time to go inside for a nap, and I just brought her alongside the dock and tied up. Thank you.